Tonight we are going to step away from the noise of the modern world and settle into a time of deep stillness where the only sounds are the gentle lapping of the Nile against the muddy banks and the soft scratch of a reed pen against papyrus. Close your eyes and let the warmth of the Egyptian sun settle over your shoulders as we begin a journey into the quiet, repetitive, and peaceful life of a scribe named Nakht, living 4,000 years ago. There's no rush here, for time in the Nile Valley moves with the slow, predictable grace of the seasons, and every task is performed with a steady, mindful patience. The morning begins long before the heat of the noon sun arrives, at a time when the air is still cool and blue, smelling faintly of damp earth and river plants. Nakht wakes on a simple mat of woven grass, feeling the texture of the fibers beneath his palms as he stretches slowly, listening to the distant, muffled sounds of the village beginning to stir. There's no sudden alarm, only the gradual brightening of the horizon and the soft chatter of birds in the nearby palm groves. He moves with deliberate care, washing his face with cool water from a ceramic jar, feeling the droplets slide down his skin and sink into the dust of the floor. His linen garment, bleached white by the sun and smelling of clean air, is wrapped around him in familiar folds, a routine he has performed thousands of times until it has become a kind of meditation. As he leaves his small, thick-walled house, the sand feels fine and cool between his toes, and he walks toward the temple complex where his work awaits him. The path is lined with sycamore trees that cast long, soft shadows across the ground, and he pauses for a moment to watch the morning mist rising off the great river. The water is like glass reflecting the pale sky, and occasionally a small fish breaks the surface, creating a single expanding circle of ripples that eventually vanishes into the reeds. Nakht breathes in deeply, feeling the stillness of the landscape, and continues his walk, his leather satchel containing his tools, bumping gently against his hip with every rhythmic step. Upon entering the scriptorium, a cool shaded room with high ceilings and thick stone walls that keep the desert heat at bay, he finds his accustomed place on the floor. He does not sit in a chair, but crosses his legs in the traditional posture of his craft, settling his weight evenly so that he can remain still for many hours. He reaches into his bag and withdraws his palette, a narrow piece of dark wood with two circular depressions, one for black ink and one for red. The wood is smooth, polished by years of contact with his hands, and it feels solid and reassuring in his grip. Beside it, he places a small jar of water and his bundle of reed pens, each one carefully cut and chewed at the end to create a fine, fibrous brush. The process of preparing his materials is slow and methodical, a quiet ritual that prepares his mind for the day's writing. He takes a cake of black pigment, made from the soot of cooking fires mixed with a light gum, and drops a single bead of water onto it from his brush. He stirs it slowly, watching as the dry powder transforms into a rich, dark liquid, swirling in the palette until it reaches the perfect consistency. He does the same with the red ochre, which is the color of the desert cliffs at sunset, used for headings and the start of new chapters. There's a profound silence in the room, broken only by the soft clinking of the water jar and the distant rhythmic thud of a distant mallet where stonecutters are working on a nearby monument. Nakht unrolls a fresh sheet of papyrus, feeling the slight resistance of the material and the subtle ridges of the overlapping plant fibers. The papyrus is a pale, creamy tan, and it crumbles slightly at the very edges, releasing a dry, grassy scent that reminds him of the marshes where the plants were harvested. He weighs down the corners with smooth river stones so the scroll stays flat, and for a few moments he simply looks at the empty surface, appreciating the potential of the blank space. He's not merely recording taxes or grain shipments, he's participating in the eternal order of the world, capturing thoughts and numbers so they may outlive the breath that spoke them. As he begins to write, his hand moves with a fluidity born of decades of practice, the reed pen dancing across the page in the elegant, cursive script of the daily records. He writes of the inundation of the river, noting the height of the water against the Nilometer and the number of baskets of barley brought into the granaries. Each sign is formed with precise intention, the ink flowing from the reed in a steady stream that dries quickly in the dry air. He feels the slight vibration of the pen against the papyrus, a tactile connection between his thoughts and the physical world. If a mistake is made, he does not panic or rush. He simply takes a small piece of damp linen and gently dabs away the wet ink, waiting patiently for the spot to dry before continuing his work. The hours pass in a seamless flow of concentration, and the light in the scriptorium shifts slowly across the floor, marking the passage of the day more accurately than any clock. At midday, when the sun is at its highest and the world outside is shimmering with heat, Knack takes a small break. He eats a simple meal of flatbread, a few dried dates, and a piece of salted fish, chewing slowly and savoring the humble flavors. He drinks from a cool clay cup, the water tasting faintly of the earth, and watches the dust motes dancing in a single beam of light that filters through a high window. There's no urgency to return to the work, only a quiet recognition that the task will be completed in its own time. In the afternoon, he works on a more formal text, perhaps a collection of wisdom or a hymn to the gods. For this, he uses his finest pens in his most careful hand, ensuring that each hieratic character is balanced and beautiful. He describes the cycles of the stars and the goodness of the earth, his mind wandering into the deep history of his people while his hand remains tethered to the present moment. The act of writing becomes a form of breathing, a slow expansion and contraction of the soul. He thinks of the scribes who came before him and those who will come after, all of them sitting in this same stillness, holding the same wooden pallets, and feeling the same cool breeze through the doorway. As the sun begins to dip toward the western horizon, turning the sky a deep, dusty violet, Knack begins to tidy his workspace. He cleans his brushes with the remaining water, smoothing the fibers back into points, and wipes his palette until the wood gleams. He rolls his scrolls with great care, securing them with linen ties and placing them into their storage jars, where they will rest in the dark, protected from the elements. His body feels a pleasant ache from the long hours of sitting, a weightiness that signals the end of the day's labor. He stands and stretches, feeling the blood return to his legs, and walks out into the evening air, which is now scented with the smoke of hearth fires and the sweet fragrance of night-blooming jasmine. The walk home is slower than the walk in the morning, for the day's work is done and there's nothing left to achieve. He passes neighbors who offer quiet nods of greeting, their voices low and hushed as the village prepares for sleep. The stars begin to appear, one by one, piercing the darkening blue with steady, ancient light. Back in his house, Knack lies down once more on his grass mat, the familiar textures grounding him as he prepares for rest. He listens to the wind sighing through the palms and the distant, low lowing of cattle in their pens. The world is at peace, the records are kept, and the river continues its eternal journey toward the sea. He closes his eyes, feeling the darkness wrap around him like a soft linen shroud, and sinks into a deep, dreamless slumber. Sleep now as the Nile flows on. Sleep as the ink dries on the page. Sleep, for the day is complete, and the stillness of the desert is yours to share.